Can you go back that one slide?
Yeah.
I love that in a corporate presentation, you do use the terms dicking around. You know that Ian has not run this through HR.
I don't. If you have a very anal HR department, you should not hire a 5-on-4 group.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you peeing son of a bitch.
I had to just have a lecture with Frank to hit the bathroom one more time because twice an episode he just blacks out his camera and it doesn't make for good. And then it's uncomfortable on me. I hope you understand when you just black out your camera and walk away because I can't interact with you. I have to just keep talking and droning on, and people tune in for me, I know, but they do want to hear you every once in a while.
Every once in a while. Like Murph a few weeks ago, he's like, it was nice to hear you go, yup, when Ian's mic went dead for 9
Yeah. I'm like the noise of this podcast, and you're the signal that people tune in to try to hear a little bit of through my static.
News noise, signal noise.
Yep. So Frankie and I, last week, as we were prepping for last week's Cracker Barrel episode, Frankie just asked me, something came up about goal setting, and he asked me if I'd seen the podcast episode from Diary of a CEO where Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, was on it. And in it, he talks about the signal and the noise. And I had not seen it, but it was really interesting that he asked me because I am right in the middle of teaching a class to a company, a large company, about goal setting and about the importance of the goal to tune noise out to get people focused, because this company is struggling with people focused during a recession. And my take around this has always been, if people aren't focused enough, check out your goals. You have a problem with the goals you're setting. They're either not visible enough, not aggressive enough, or the deadline's not close enough. And Frank, you were kind of right in the middle of thinking about this signal and noise in a different capacity.
So this video came across my desk because one of the guys I interact with on the internet, somebody commented on it, and our phones are listening to us. So I'd never heard of it in this kind of connotation. And I read it, and then it just started following me around the internet. But to put this in perspective for you, Ian and I are very close. We have text threads with groups individually, but Ian asked me a couple minutes ago, like, did you watch the thing I sent you? And I don't think I did. And I sent him this video and he didn't watch it. So in some instances, like if you're going to actually be a productive human in today's society, you have to block things out. And that's the entire content about what it is. I sent him this video 2 times. He didn't watch it. And finally we watched it together last week before the Cracker Barrel. And he's like, this is perfect because it dovetails really nicely with where we are. But all of us deal with this. So if you look like on the internet or you go through the best books of all times. So signal noise is the difference between kind of filtering things that are allowed to get in and aren't. We've talked about it on this podcast before. Something I'm a big believer in is the difference between news and noise. And most things are news. They want you to believe, most things are noise. They want you to believe that every piece of noise is news, but it isn't. There's only a couple of things that actually happen that are actually newsworthy. And then it's just a bunch of talking heads trying to get you to buy heart-on medicine because you sit through the commercials. So there's
boner pills.
There you go. So that's kind of the difference, right? But in its simplest form, this comes down to productivity, time management. So Ian and I were talking about some of the most important books. What are some of the ones that come to mind for you, Ian, on important pillars of time management?
The classic is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which was Covey. He also wrote First Things First, which is a big concept in that book.
Yep. There's Hal Elrod's Win Over Your Morning, right? Which every dipshit in real estate loves. There's Buy Back Your Time. There's Eat That Frog. There's the 4-Hour Work Week. There's Gary Keller's The One Thing. There's Essentialism. There's all these different books. And Ian and I, over the course of this podcast, have done other podcasts about specifically time management. But what it comes down to is the people who are the most productive. We all have news, we all have noise, we all have signal, we all have noise, we all have these things that bug us. Our watches vibrate, our phones vibrate. The people who are the most productive inside of a company as a business owner, and then the people who get written down in history books, they all have a relationship with how much time they spend on their core task and how much time they spend away from their core task and allowing things to get distracted. And the way that I'd put it is, if your earning potential is going to be, there's two major things to focus on: where you put your time and how valuable where you dedicate your time can be. And not all of us are chasing after money, but if you look at the people who end up in a history book, they're chasing after something much bigger than most of us. So this came up, and it's around Kevin O'Leary, who's known as Mr. Wonderful on TV. And he's someone who's called a shark. So he gives money to upstarts, right? So he's someone who's at the top of the heap. And he's talking about someone who's at the top of another heap, Steve Jobs, and how Steve Jobs, although an asshole, and it's important to watch this whole video because we're going to come back to this in a minute. Steve Jobs was an asshole, but he was also incredibly good at putting his time into something that became very valuable. And he was very, 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 very specific on what he spent his time on.
I also think Frank brought up time management. And I think when most people think about time management, they think about how you can get more done in a day, more tasks, right? They normally, when I see time management taught, it's kind of task management, which I think is it's ass backwards. I think if you're thinking of in terms of how do I get 15 to 20 things squeezed into every day, you're not thinking about impact. That usually, if you have to get 15, 20 things done every day, you're probably in a lower paid salary job.
Correct. Right.
There are those jobs available. They're usually entry level. If you're still doing that stuff 25 years into your career, you did something wrong.
Or that's where you want to be. There's great admins who are 30, are getting ready to retire, but they're happy with that. They don't live to work; they work to live. But there's a trade-off.
But even Frankie, I'll even argue, even a great executive admin knows how to prioritize the biggest things every day. And I think
100%.
what we're going to talk about in this episode is how do you, first things first, how do you start with what are my priorities and how do I get locked on those? And O'Leary, I think, without going into this any further, O'Leary does a really good job of explaining this. And I'm just going to go ahead and show. Here we go.
I used to work for Steve Jobs in the early 90s, making all of his educational software. By the way, not a nice guy. Not a nice guy. He would say to a room full of people, Kevin, I don't give a shit what the students want or the parents think or anybody thinks. It's what I want. They don't know what they want till I tell them what they want. And I said, Steve, you sound like such an asshole. You have no idea what that sounds like. He says, no, that's how it is, Kevin. Now, are you making money with me? Am I your fastest growing OEM? Have we not been wildly successful and continue to be? I said, yes, Steve, that's true. He said, then fucking shut up and do what I say.
That's how he would talk to you.
100%. And here's what I learned: signal to noise ratio. His vision of signal was the top 3 to 5 things you have to get done in the next 18 hours. Not your vision for the business next week or next month or next year, just the next 18 hours you're awake. You're going to get those 3 things or those 5 things done that you have deemed critical for your mission. They must get done today. Anything that stops you from doing that is the noise. This signal to noise ratio to be successful for Steve Jobs was 80-20. 80 signal, 20 noise. He was right. He was right. And the only other person that I've seen that has a higher ratio than that is Elon Musk.
So I love all of that. One thing I do love too, there's been such a whitewashing of Steve Jobs' character.
Now he's dead.
Since he died, like he was this philosophical guy who was a great leader that empowered people. I love that Kevin O'Leary's like, guy's an asshole. right? Not a nice guy, not a nice human being, but incredibly productive.
I want to start right there with the asshole part. So asshole is also known as self-serving, selfish. There's other things with asshole that are all synonyms.
An orifice that excretes waste.
There we go. But the reason it's relevant here is this. If you want to achieve something, I think there's nicer ways to do it. But if you want to achieve something, it requires a singular focus. And a singular focus can be manifested by complete asshole tendencies. But what it takes is blinders in a lot of instances. So people who achieve, I know, get up early, stay late, they often ignore different things. That can be looked at as being an asshole or being someone who's selfish or self-serving. But what I think you can do this in a very healthy way for most of us. You can do it in an unhealthy way. And I think Jobs and Musk, and if you go back another century, you get into the Vanderbilts and the Carnegies, like those are the people who achieved at massive levels, but it was always at forsaking something else. So what I think you have to look at this is in order to achieve, you have to be a little bit selfish to understand what it is that you are really trying to achieve. And you have to put blinders on to other things to be isolated. And it doesn't have to be a ton. It can be, 4 hours of your workday that your really productive time. So the reason I think that's important is no matter what it is you want to do, you have to have blinders in some ways.
The reason why the asshole thing is important here is if you're going to focus on 80% signal and only allow 20% for noise, the noise are usually requests from other people.
Correct.
They are things that others deem as important for you. They might be
They're important to them and not to you.
It might be their signal, and they're trying to get you to help with it. And people who turn those down and say no to all that noise, if you're constantly doing it and you don't have bedside manner, which Jobs had no bedside manner.
Correct.
But he would tell people that's a waste of time. We're not working on that. That's stupid. We don't need this. Musk gets the reputation of an asshole too, because obviously has zero emotional intelligence. He's on the spectrum. He's got Asperger's. He's admitted that. And so he doesn't mind telling you that's a stupid idea. We're not going to waste time on that. That people that turn noise down can be seen as rude or not helpful when really they're just ultra locked in on what really matters.
That's right.
And the signal and noise. So there's a book written like 15 years ago, and it's very popular in the tech startup space called Signal and Noise. It's written by Nate Silver, and it's a little bit of a wonky book, but he goes into this very concept and he applies it into startups and small businesses. And being a wonky guy, Silver kind of equates it a little bit in some ways to electricity and engineering. And I didn't take too many electrical engineering classes, but I did take linear circuit analysis, which any engineer has to take. And it's kind of the electrical engineering 101 class, just the first double E class everyone has to take. And you learn about signal and noise in there from the way electric current moves through a circuit. So in any given electrical circuit, there's multiple sources of current could be flowing through your circuit, and a well-designed circuit can filter out the noise. And so, like an example, in our tech startup in Keep, we have a car alarm, and we built our own circuit board. We had to design it, we had to engineer it, and on a circuit board are dozens and dozens of little circuits, and you have to build what's called shielding. And I think this is really interesting. So shielding is a way that you engineer noise out of a system. So if you have multiple circuits next to each other, Frank, they are emitting interference, magnetic interference, electrical magnetic interference. And if you have enough of them around another circuit, all of that noise can overwhelm that circuit signal, and you get false positives. You get false alarms. You trip things accidentally. And so you build what's called shielding, which, it is what it sounds like. It's like mini fences that you build around it. One, for the whatever interference your circuit is kicking out, it doesn't impact everything around it, but also blocking out the noise. So a good circuit focuses exclusively on its signal and does its job. But if it's not shielded, right? And we're going to talk about how you shield it and what good time blocking is and time management and focus is. If you don't shield it, it will let the noise overwhelm it and not do its job. That's how it looks in double E.
Yep. So SNR equals a signal divided by the noise, and SNR stands for signal noise ratio. So Ian's an engineer. This is how he thinks of this. When I brought this concept up to my wife, like, she immediately goes to the linguistic side because she's got a PhD in linguistics. And there's signal noise ratio in the linguistic world too. So there's a practical application, there's an engineering application, there's a linguistic application. And in its simplest form, the signal noise ratio measures and compares the level of desired signal to the level of unwanted background noise. So you want to achieve something, you tell someone, no, I'm not going to go there this weekend. I'm going to work on something that seems selfish, or you're a jerk because you're taking out other things and pushing them to the side. Noise. A higher signal noise ratio means the signal is much stronger and clearer than the noise, making it easier to detect or interrupt. So here's an analogy. So I'm getting older. When someone speaks, sometimes when Ian speaks, I'll literally put my hand behind my ear. And the reason I do that is I want my ear to be bigger. I want to be able to hear things. I want a louder signal and I want to detract noise. So like at parties, I'll do that sometimes. Like, and the whole reason for that is this. If you're having a conversation in a crowded room, the signal is the voice you're trying to hear, and all the other conversations, music, horns, sirens, kids running around with tractors, all that's noise. So in a quiet room, when you're speaking clearly, your signal to noise ratio is very high. And in a room that's crowded and loud, the signal to noise ratio is very low, and it's harder for you to hear. So that's the linguistic way to kind of look at this.
And I'm going to stay on the linguistic piece of it for just one more second. So if you are in a crowded room and somebody is in that room who's important, and they are talking about something that could be of immense value to you, and let's say they're 10, 15 feet away, the human body, depending on just how important it is, the human body has an incredible way of blocking out your senses and locking in on the signal, and it extenuating the senses. You read the lips a little bit better. You watch the body language. You can pick up the sound of that person's voice if you need it to come into, because it is important to you, right? Is of importance. It's the same reason why a cornered animal is dangerous. Their flight doesn't kick in. It's all fight. And once the brain thinks, okay, we're fighting and there's no choice, it extenuates all of your fight, right? Your adrenaline goes up, your muscles get stronger. You literally are a tougher person to fight. And I think it's the same thing with signal and noise. The more important it is, the more in tune you can get to the signal. And my take on signal and noise is always around goals. It's always around goals. And part of in this discussion today, if you're listening to this or watching on YouTube, I'm gonna share a few slides and kind of take Frank through some of the things that I'm talking to this company about, but talk about it in terms of Frank's business and some of the things he's working on. So I'm kind of excited to show some of these things to Frankie. I've not showed it to him just yet. So if you look at most people, right, tell themselves a lie. They say, if I had more time, I'd get more done, right? And so you have a certain amount of time, and some percentage of that time you're doing actual work, and another smaller percentage of it you're dicking around. And I think anyone who's had kids knows this, right, Frankie? Like, before you had kids, you would feel busy and you would feel like you didn't have enough time. And then you have kids and you're like, what was I doing with all my free time? Because it's all been taken from me, right? And it gets so intense that you're like, oh my God, I had so much time to screw around before these kids came around, where they ended up sucking up all of that extra time.
I'll say something really funny. So I have a friend he's exactly my age, but he's got kids that are 10 years older than mine. And we were having a conversation. He says, you think you value your free time, and other people who are single, didn't have kids yet, all started to say something. He goes, no, you don't. But the more important part of that is this past summer, we went on a family vacation, and then we had our kids go with my mom for a full week. And we were home for 5 days, my wife and me, without kids. And we were almost like, there was almost boredom. Like, what do we do? Like, we can go for a walk, and there's
you end up wasting a lot of time because you're not prepared for it. Like, you don't plan it enough. I always feel like I wish I would have planned when I get that free day or two. I wish I'd have planned even more and squeezed even more in, because you end up because you have so much time, you end up burning a lot of it, just sitting on the couch and chilling.
And people who don't have enough to do, what I will say is this: there's another analogy that I love. It's, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person, because busy people know how to get things done, and people who aren't busy don't.
Busy people, give it to a busy person. Normally they're busy on the signal, right? So that's why they get things done. They don't let noise get in the way. But most people, what we're talking about here, Frank, when you give them more time, they don't work more. It doesn't. Right. It doesn't add to that. They end up just that they expand that time with more dicking around time. So my video.
I have to point out one thing really quickly. Can you go back to that one slide?
Yeah.
I love that in a corporate presentation, you do use the terms dicking around. You know that Ian has not run this through HR.
I don't. If you have a very anal HR department, you should not hire a 5-on-4 group.
Or listen to this podcast.
No, you should not. I pick and choose my customers wisely. And so, Frankie, Leadership Essentials is my video program that I do. That's 12-week management class, and you get a new video every week, and you have a week to watch it before you get on your group call with I have 4 to 10 managers on with me, and we talk about the video from the previous week.
95% watch the same day.
Yeah, I've had classes at the end say, hey, it'd be nice if we could meet every 2 weeks, and I had a little bit more time. And I've done that before. I've done this class, a 12-week class, in 24 weeks before. But if you think about, okay, I need more time, so when are you going to watch my videos? It's actually 70%. Actually, there's a decent percent that are teachers' pets. They watch the day before, right? Not same day. Same day, 70% of managers who go through my class literally watch the video like an hour before they get on with me, just so they're not embarrassed, because I will call you out and ask you questions about the video while you're on there. When I made it go to 2 weeks to give them extra time, the percentage did not change. It was still 70% of people. I gave them an extra week, and they still watched it an hour before class.
And you left out the people that I paid to have go through your program that never watched it at all.
Well, I usually fire Frank's managers halfway through the class and tell them, let me know when you've got a new group. I'm excited to work with the new group. So, Frankie, when you think about a goal, like what's the purpose of, when you set a goal, what's the purpose of a goal?
So it depends on the length, right? Like when I started my business and when I really got crystal clear on what it was, like I had a long-term goal, like very, very, very long-term, 20, 30 years into the future. And it depends. So the length really matters. Am I trying to get something achieved today? Is it a 3-month goal? Is it a 6-month goal? Is it a year-long goal? Is it a 5-year goal? So it really depends on the time frame. And then once the time frame, then it kind of feathers into what I'm trying to achieve. But it's usually you're trying to improve something, add something, or make something better.
And to improve something or make something better, you need motivation.
Yep.
Right. So you need some kind of a motivation. You're right. There's short and there's long-term goals. Parkinson's law, right? So you've heard of this, Frankie, before, right? This is kind of time expands to fill the allotted time you have to get something done. What Parkinson found, though, in a series of different studies and businesses is that the optimal time to complete work is normally like a third of what's given out. And no matter what deadline you give somebody to do something, they will find a way to stretch the work out just perfectly to come sliding into home.
Yeah.
Like they almost never have a stand-up triple. They're always having to dive headfirst like Pete Rose into third no matter what. You can give them a week to do it. You can give them a day to do it. They're going to dive into third. They're going to, the work will expand so they just hit the deadline, right? So because of that, and if you believe that is true, then most deadlines, which are arbitrary, they're created by humans, most deadlines are not aggressive enough, right? If you believe Parkinson's law that most work takes longer. And when you're coaching someone as a manager, right, and or coaching yourself, there's a concept of readiness to change in psychology that until a person's ready, they'll find anything they can to stall, to avoid progress, to avoid preparation. That's why in Alcoholics Anonymous, what's the first step? Not Frank's never been an alcoholic, so it's probably unfair that I'm asking him in that way, but I would think you know the first step of.
Does it admit you have a problem?
Yeah, so Frank nailed it, right? Readiness to change. There is no point of moving on to steps 2 through 12 in Alcoholics Anonymous until you get through 1, which is admit you're an alcoholic, right? I've been to an AA meeting. I went with a friend one time because he got a DUI in college, so I had to sit through, and it was kind of sad. But everyone starts when they talk by saying, "Hi, I'm Ian, and I'm an alcoholic." That, like, they always come back to step 1. Admit you have a problem, and then you are ready to change. But until you admit it, when you act cool and you kind of push back and say, I can control this, you're never going to change. You're never going to get better. And the solution to readiness to change and not being readiness to change, in my opinion, is an aggressive public goal. It is putting yourself out there, telling people what your goal is, and setting a deadline that will focus you on it. And in psychology, another concept is prospection. Prospection is what makes humans different from other animals. So my dog, I got a Yorkshire Terrier, a little tiny 6-pound dog. All my dog thinks about all day is, when can I eat again? And when can I go outside and smell piss on flowers and take pisses on it? That's all my dog thinks about all day long. And then, when can I sleep? Like, there's 3 times a day.
It's why Ian likes me so much. I have basically the same
Same urges. Frank has the same urges all day long. But animals live 100% in the present. They don't think about tomorrow. They're not smart enough to think about the future. Animals don't set goals. Animals are motivated by the immediate environment around them. They don't have a concept of time, right? So their actions, their desires, their motivation is real primal, and it is in the moment. They just live in the moment, which, it's funny. Sometimes if you see people in an office, they kind of live the same way. They roll up with no plan. They open their email and they just start handling shit that comes at them throughout the day like a frickin' dog would, instead of the way humans are typically motivated is the future. Even if you're not a very motivated person, you think about retirement, right? You think about a different life you might live, a different house you might live in. You think about getting to different steps, and that is what motivates your behavior. And if you have people that are struggling to change, or you're struggling to change your behaviors, I always come back to, it's the quality of your goals, right? Either your goal's not challenging enough, or the timeline is too far out, or you haven't been vocal. You've only told yourself what the goal is. You haven't told other people that you care about, but really it's usually the timeline and the challenge of the goal. As I say all of that, do you have any holes that you would poke in any of that?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's sound logic. Clearly, you're pretty good at this, and you built it. I mean, it all smacks up against like SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Like that's it. And then I think it comes down to
very impressive, quick, half-ass internet research that you just busted out there. That was awesome.
Yeah, just following along.
Pretty good stuff.
I'm not used to being the pupil, so this is fun. Just keep on going.
That was awesome. I love that. Good. Dynamite drop in. That's good color commentary. So, if you look at innovation, innovation to me is discomfort, right? So to innovate, you have to go through some form of discomfort. You can, if you say for a sports team, right? Michael Jordan didn't win championships until he got his ass kicked a few times by the Pistons. And right, then he had to innovate his game. He had to change his game. He had to change his body. He had to go through all that. A company, for our car alarm, our Keep car alarm, it didn't look like this in the beginning. We've gone through a lot of pain, a lot of customers sending their car alarm back. Our Jonathan, our CTO, is a really smart guy. He's had to innovate a lot, and all of that innovation started with something not working, right? Some kind of a failure. And for me, the level of innovation is in line with the level of discomfort. And so I have here a chart that just shows a goal, and it's spread out over time. And if you just look at this goal right here, Frankie, this farther one out, if you look at the line going all the way down in the angle, it looks like you're walking up a small hill, right? Little bit discomfort, you're breathing hard, the goal's kind of far enough out, but the angle that I'm going is not that far. If you want more innovation, you simply make the goal higher, you reach a little bit farther, or you accelerate when the goal is going to get done. And in doing that in both ways, if you're looking at this on YouTube, you're going to see a much steeper angle of discomfort, of innovation. And Frankie, think about for yourself, if you were to say, hey, I'm going to go run in a 5-mile race, right? And I'd like to get a decent time. If you said that, okay, that's a goal, right? That's putting it out there. That's telling people. But it's not going to force you to innovate much. You know how to train for that. That's kind of simple. But back in your formative days, when you would tell people, I'm going to do a tough man, or I'm going to go do a triathlon. When you were doing that, talk about signal and noise with a triathlon. You couldn't waste much time. I mean, how much time were you spending when you were training for your tri? How much time were you spending training in a given day?
On a low day, like an hour, and on a high day, up to 4.
Up to 4. So there were days where you would run, bike, and swim.
Oh yeah,
I remember that. You would do all 3 on some days.
some days, mostly weekends, and that was before kids.
Yeah, mostly weekends. But if you think about that, the goal is what was driving you to go through that discomfort. That's discomfort. 4 hours of 3 different disciplines, but you had a date certain when you were going to have to run this. You also, it was very public. How many friends did you do your triathlons with? 7 or 8?
We started off with a smaller group in the 3-4 range, and it became like 8 by the end. And there's something else I think that really is critical here to kind of talk about, right? So with a triathlon, it's 3 exercises. It's swimming, it's biking, and it's running. And the way they do it is they have it in reverse order. The one you do first is the one you have the highest likelihood of dying on. And the one you do last is the one you have the least amount of likelihood to die on. They don't have you swim last because you're tired and you can drown. So what I did when I did this preparation is you can always, if you can't run, you can walk. And if you can't bike really fast, you just bike slower. But the one that you can really get killed on is swimming. So what you had to really kind of prioritize.
You can't just stop swimming.
Right. You just can't. You can tread water, but that's really hard to do. Like you're better off just sitting under a tree if you can't run anymore than treading water. So when you start to focus on it, although there's really 5 things in a triathlon. There's also the transition points, but the big 3 are those. And what you start to focus on is like, okay, where am I the weakest? Well, I was weakest at swimming. So I put the most amount of time into swimming, and I got to be functional at swimming. And as my running got better, my swimming got better too, because my conditioning went up. But the whole point was you really had to focus on the one that had the highest likelihood of sinking the whole effort.
Yeah. And that goal of showing up. So Frank knew there is a date in my future, right? This is, again, talking about how the future drives your present motivation.
Yeah.
There is a date in my future where I'm going to show up and 4 of my friends are going to be in good shape. I know my friends. They're not going to be lazy about this and just roll up. I'm showing up I know a couple of these guys are going to have they're going to show up in incredible shape, right? Nickel's not going to show up. Nickel's showing up to try to place, right? He's trying to get a good number. So if Frank showed up out of shape and all of them finished, and Frank said, I didn't, I couldn't make it through the bike. I didn't even get to the run part. That's embarrassing. And that thought process drives your focus. That's your signal. So Frank, on what he woke up and did every day, out of the thousands of things he could do, all of the noise in his life, he found a way to spend an hour and a half to 4 hours a day. I remember when you were training, you were intensely focused on it. Hour and a half to 4 hours a day of training. That is signal. And that is driven by a really big goal. What is how many miles swim, how many miles bike, how many run?
So we did a 70.3. So it's 1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike, and a half marathon at the end.
56 mile bike. That's crazy. And then you got to run a half marathon after. So that is not a small goal. That is such a big goal that it eliminates all noise from your life. Like if you're going to get to that day, you have to eliminate noise.
And most people ask this question if you've done the half Ironman or the 70.3, right? They ask you, are you going to do a full Ironman, which is 140.6. So everything doubles. And you think it's double. No, it's not double. It's a lot more than double the work to get that done. Like the competition, but the training window goes from about 3.5, 4 months to like 9. And the amount of time goes up. And like to go 112 miles on a bike, I mean, if you're flying, that takes almost 4 hours. Like best case scenario takes 3. Like Lance Armstrong would take 3, like at 40 miles an hour. Like that's nuts. So the amount of it's like you have to look at those things.
That's incredible. And there's, when you talk about time leverage, so Frank just talked about, one takes 3 months to train, one takes 9 months. So you're spreading that out a little bit. The farther you put a goal out or a target or something, the less motivated you are today, right? Doesn't mean you're not motivated, but the less motivated you are today. The closer the deadline gets, the more motivated you are. So if you're, a stupid way of looking at this, if you're going on a trip with a bunch of friends and you got to be in a bathing suit, and that trip is like next March, am I really thinking about it today, or is that noise? It's probably not a signal. If I'm meeting up with those friends in 2 weeks, it's signal. I'm focused. My diet is locked in. I'm running every morning. I'm trying to squeeze the last couple pounds out to look as good as I can in that bathing suit. And our CEO at NVR had a thing that he used to do. If something was really important to him and you were in a meeting with him, and let's say we talked about 5 things, Frankie, our CEO, if there was something that he wanted to bring to the top of your list on focus, he would say, Ian, you are not on calendar time with this. You are on watch time. And what that meant is I'm measuring your success on this in hours and not days. And every time he would say that, and he would point to his watch and grin at you when he did it, whenever Paul did that, within 20 minutes of leaving the meeting, I would have an email with another calendar invitation from Darlene, with Paul, and it would be within a week, where we're following up on it. And what I always found awesome about that, whenever he would do his watch time, you're on watch time on this, it simplified my life. I would go look at my calendar from the next 5 days, whatever, in between now and meeting with Paul again. And I would delete everything out of it that had nothing to do with what Paul's goal was and what I was on watch time about. I would just delete it. I would just say, hey, got to bump this, got to move this, can't make this. All of the noise in my calendar, Frankie, would go away whenever he would say you're on watch time. It would just go away. And I would also, everyone under me who could help me get that goal accomplished, I would wipe out all the noise on their calendar by telling them this is right. Let me help you prioritize. This is the signal. And we're going to meet multiple times a day until I am confident that we have fixed this by the time I go in with our CEO.
Yeah. Keep going. You're on a roll.
Yeah. And often where I see companies get this wrong, they have these 5-year plans. Our 5-year plan is to double. We're double in size. And they say it every year. And it doesn't really motivate anyone in the company. Does that really, like, that goal, who's focused on it? What are you doing? Even annual goals. I find, like, this year, most builders missed their plan on sales. I work with a lot of home builders. A lot of them are missing their plan. It was a kind of a crappy year in the home building business. And when you start feeling like your annual goal is gone early, you lose all motivation. It doesn't keep you focused. You lose the signal that it goes through. And even a lot of times, the annual goal, if you can't break it down to the month, to the week, you lose focus from people. And if you have a frame that's low, there are hundreds of pathways that can get you to your frame, right? So just like the difference between Frankie doing a 5 mile and 70.3, 5 mile, there are hundreds of ways he could go run a 5 mile and do it okay, right? There are lots of things he could do he could take days off. He could work out for 20 minutes a day. He could take a whole week off and probably still run the 5 mile. The frame is low. So all those different pathways work. But as soon as he ratcheted it up, right, when he raised the bar way up to, I'm going to do a triathlon, now all of those pathways that are red don't work anymore. Like, it doesn't work me taking days off. It doesn't work me working out for 30 minutes a day. I can't spend all of my time working 12 hours a day because I got to figure out how to fit 4 hours in. I'm going to a pool, then I'm going to bike, then I'm going to run. So you run out of pathways, and it focuses you. That goal focuses you. And that's called selective attention. That's when we filter the most relevant information and ignore everything else, right? And that's driven by the scope and the clarity of the goal. And so if you're a manager and your people are lacking motivation, or they're lacking focus, or you feel like you're talking about the same things over and over and over, I would say raise the floor of your goals, raise the intensity of the goals, and it will eliminate noise for them. They will get incredibly focused very fast on working on the things that you want them to work on. So, Frankie, right now, do you have a department that you are focused on improving, or you've got one that you need to kind of pick up the pace, or a big goal that you're trying to reach in your real estate business?
So we have, I did an annual kind of like a mid-year kind of a presentation about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we are at 93% of plan dated on the calendar on a pretty big stretch goal on the wholesale side of the business. We're at 150% of plan on our rental business. So that means we've collected 150% more rents than we projected, which is good. And then on our construction business, we're at 27% of plan. So if you look at it, like, that's completely out of skew. So what we have done is as follows. I had a group of people that were in that department that just didn't understand, that didn't think we could achieve what it was that we wanted to achieve. And we had to kind of rip it down to the studs and start over. And what's critical about this is the rest of the business was doing well. And when I was going through this transition, I talked to one of the people in the department. He's like, I don't understand why you're going to change jockeys halfway through the race. I'm like, we're not changing jockeys. The jockey and the horse died. If you're at 27%, like, you got to scrap it. And one of the things you have to start with in any of these things is you have to start with people who think they can achieve it. And it's not just people who say they can achieve it, it's people who actually take active measures in order to achieve it. And you can tell this when you have the right group, because we're a small company. You can tell if you have the right group because people are like getting real antsy when they know that they're not at the pace they need to be. They're asking questions or follow-up or things along those lines. Like, that's the reason I have so much more optimism around my construction department than I used to have, is because we literally have someone who's a leader and someone who understands, like, hey, we may have to problem solve this or come up with a new solution. Like, we're getting blocked. How do you get around that? And that's a very critical part of it. But yes, as an owner and a manager, those are things you have to absolutely pay attention to, and you have to kind of filter those away. The other thing, Ian, I went through this when I did the signal noise for the whole company. If you really look at it, there's probably like 8 categories that I work on, but 8's way too many. But when I really, really got down to it, it comes down to revenue. It comes down to staffing personnel. It comes down to cash and finances, and it comes down to issues and other. It's literally 4. Now, issues and other can be a really long one. It can be big, but
that almost seems like your noise category. Like
correct. And what happens is if
kind of noise,
right, and what you do with that one is you push that to the bottom if the top 3 are the ones that get in your way. So like if you're running into problems with revenue, construction, I stopped doing email and got out in the field until I found the new construction manager. When you're dealing with cash problems or financing or big deals coming up that you have to fund, hey, I'm going to step out of email for a while. I'm not going to get away from this. We're going to get away from these few things in the other category, and you really start to focus on those. So there's really 3 critical ones, and there's one that can be quite large, but sometimes you just have to ignore it.
I love that. I like what you just said about the ignore. It gets into. I have 3 kind of famous people and their examples and how they look at signal and noise. But what you just said is the way Warren Buffett looks at investing, and it's the way he looks at focusing on the right thing. So I'm gonna play this video.
I've told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. 4 or 5 will probably do it over time.
I've seen that. It's great.
Yeah. So it's, his concept, I absolutely, you and I obviously love everything Warren says, but it's a little bit signal noise. Think about like a brand new investor. I probably started buying stocks when I was 21, 22, and buying penny stocks and ones that I could afford and putting maybe 1,000 in at a time. I was a horrible investor because I would get a tip from somebody, or I would read something in the Wall Street Journal, or I would see something on CNBC and I would buy it, right? Maybe I'd buy $2,000 worth of stock, and I wouldn't fully research it. I was buying it based on noise. I was buying it based on randomness. And then as soon as the stock would drop 10%, I would sell it. Oh man, I got it wrong. And I would get out, right? And then I would buy the next hot tip that I heard. I did that for years, like not making any money. It was almost like Frank's old Bovada gambling account that he never seemed to take any checks from, just put it in. It was random and it was 50-50. It was like sports betting and it wasn't real productive. I didn't get good at investing until I started really researching why I wanted to buy it. Because then when the market would drop, I had conviction and I was slower. And I own 5 stocks right now, right? Now I own a lot of them, but I own 5. And when I make more money from my business, I usually put them into the same 5 because I researched the hell out of them and they're kind of on my punch card, right? I say no to all the noisy, all the sexy, all the stuff that's shooting, all of the people who come on CNBC and say this stock's going to triple. I don't get caught up in all that unless I've really researched it and I have conviction. And Buffett, he has one other thing, Frankie, that's very similar to the way Kevin O'Leary explained jobs. Buffett has a 5-25 rule, right? I think you've probably heard this before. And he says when you're trying to figure out what you want to do in your life, or you're trying to figure out how to reach a good goal, make a list of your top 25 priorities. Then highlight the top 5. And similar to Frank's other category, the other piece of this for Buffett is throw away the 20. Like throw them away. Take that sheet of paper, throw it away. You're never going to get to it. And if you try to get to all 25, you'll just do a little bit of all of them and you won't get to your priorities. Only focus on the 5 out of the 25. And Frankie's a Red Sox fan, so I know he's going to love this. Ted Williams, he is the last guy to hit 400 in a Major League Baseball season. And when he hit 400 in his season, no one had done it in the American League in 13 years. So I think he was in his third year in the league. I think he did this in 1942, and he was a rookie in 39. So imagine the brashness of a 23-year-old, 3 years into the league saying, I want to hit 400. That was his stated goal. You're talking about guys like Ty Cobb and Wagner and some of the greats of the game. Very few have ever done it. But his big thing, Ted Williams' big thing was, if I want to hit 400, I can only swing at my favorite pitches, only the ones where I have a high probability of success. If I swing at pitchers' pitches, I am not going to get there. And he knew down to the exact quadrant of the strike zone what his batting average was, what the average was in league, what his batting average was. And when he started hitting at a much higher clip is when he quit swinging so much. He took more walks, right? Because a walk doesn't hurt your batting average. It's actually fine, get you on base. And he would really focus on what are my high probability pitches. I see this as signal and noise, Frankie. The signal are my favorite pitches. The noise is everything else. Even if the umpire calls it a strike, right? That low and away pitch, that's a 230 batting average. Why would I swing at that? I'm going to swing at middle in. I hit 440 on that pitch, right? That's my pitch. Even a crappy hitter hits 400 on that pitch. So that's signal and noise. Locking in on the exact pitch that I want to swing at and ignoring all of the other pitches that he might throw me.
So the way that I look at this is this, right? So if you own a business, you can't just ignore shit. You just can't. So what you do is you staff. You hire people who deal with the stuff that you're not going to be able to deal with. That's number one. You have to look at that. Now, inside of that, there's other decisions to make, right? Like I have someone who looks at my email and I tell point blank, like, I'm not spending my time in email. It's your responsibility to make sure it comes to me. And then there's other departments where if they need something from me and they send it, the best way to communicate it is in an email. I put it back on them and say, look, I'm not looking at my email until further notice. So if you need me, it's your responsibility to make sure that I see it. You take there's a filtering process. There's no way every email that someone sends you, they're going to call you up or text you and make sure that you see it. But on the revenue side, we need to sign a lease. We have a negotiation going on. Hey, we have a project that we're trying to get done. We're trying to buy something. It gets real specific. The other side of it is this, going back to kind of Buffett's thing with the punch card. I own almost no stock. I'm just not good at it. I don't see the market. I can't feel the market. Like Ian's like, good day today. I saw the antitrust suit thing kind of came to a head for Google, but I don't really know what that means. I don't pay attention to it. But what I can tell you with great certainty is there's basically 5 things that we invest in. We buy single family homes and we either wholesale them, we take them to rent to a blue collar or workforce housing, and most of that becomes Section 8. We sell houses that are very, very, very price efficient, which really goes in line with our Section 8 stuff. And then we sell things on the discretionary move up side. So second, third, fourth time move up people. That's basically it. And it's all inside of Richmond. Like we don't go into Chesterfield. We don't go into Hanover. Like we're really, 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 really specific. And we had to learn what those things are. But those are basically the 5 things that I know that my likelihood of screwing up is insanely low because it's in my strike zone. It's the stuff where I can hit 400. And I have a higher average than 400. I'm probably like 90 some odd % able to get a deal right in that zone. You don't get them all right, but you still get the high likelihood of success. And it's because I say no to a ton.
I love that. And you say no to more than you're leading on to also. In some businesses, you can't say no to some things because they apply to your signal. Yep. But you've gotten into some business lines and gotten out when you were like, I don't have the focus for that, or it's not a profitable business, or I have better places to deploy my capital. I've seen you do that. I've seen you get in and out, dip your toe in. It's too noisy. It's not helping me. I'm pulling over here.
To Buffett's point about the punch card, I don't think I'm 50. So if I'm at midlife, hopefully I'm not quite midlife, but let's call it midlife. If I'm halfway through my life, I don't think
2/3, 75%, you're close.
Exactly. Maybe I die in 5 minutes. Our loyal listeners will be thrilled. But if that does in fact happen, like if you think of it from this perspective on the punch card, there's no way I'm at halfway to 20. There isn't. I don't need 20. And if you look at it from this perspective, like I'm no Ted Williams, I can't hit a fastball or a curveball. But what I can tell you is this, because I've gotten really, really, really focused on single family homes, and that's most of what I spend my time on, my annual return on my money when I 28 years of doing this is 31,250% is my annualized growth on the money that I started with. So like I say no to almost everything. So you don't have to be incredibly wide. You just need to be really narrow, focused over time, and let things continue long term. And then Warren Buffett's other thing that comes into play, especially if you're in real estate, is compounding. And that tends to really add up over time.
Frank, I really like what you said there on the stock front also. Before we got on here, Frank and I were talking about depreciation and the various tax laws. And, you know, I get lost in some of that minutia because I don't live in that world like you do. And to me, it's noisy. And I've had people, you know, there are multiple ways I can invest my money. I've had people say, why don't you get into residential real estate, you know, be a landlord or buy a couple properties. And it's noisy. It's annoying. I wouldn't want to do it. I enjoy the stock side of it. And if I want some real estate exposure, I do the commercial real estate because I know it now and it's a little bit simpler. But also, if I want residential, I let Frank do that. Because guess what? Frank has a team. Let him deal with the guy who's complaining about plumbing. Let him deal with permits. Let him deal with the city and trying to figure out how to get payments from ADUs. He's got a whole business built on this. If I were to try to do it, it would envelope my day. Like if I tried to go out and buy a bunch of them, just because I have the assets, if I tried to go buy a dozen residential properties and be a landlord, I don't have, you've built that experience over 20 years. I have none of it. And so for me, everything would be new, everything would be hard, everything would be stressful. My life would be incredibly noisy, or I can forego some of the upside on it and just invest. If I want some of that exposure, just invest with you and let you deal with the noise because I'll give you the upside on it and you can give me a monthly coupon, but you are more experienced at dealing with a lot of the things that would be very noisy to me.
But inside of that, as an example, right? Like I'm really good at houses, but I'm not as good at commercial construction. And commercial construction is not all that different. It's the same process. You follow the same steps. But here's an example. I bought a property 8 years ago. It was a mixed use commercial with space over the top with 2 units. I owned the thing in cash, so I wasn't like a big rush. I wanted the neighborhood to kind of change. I've had residents in that unit for over 3 years on the residential side, and I still don't have the commercial space occupied. Now it papers because I bought it at 45 grand, but I'm not good at it. So like I was having this conversation with my wife, and I'm just like, we're not doing that anymore. Like, what are you going to do? Well, if those opportunities come up, we're going to buy it deep enough where we can just hire somebody, have the banking relationship right, and then just go vertical with it that way. So those are the big things you have to kind of look at is like, you have to continue to refine this thing. And as you get older and older, as time progresses, like in the old days in the NFL, players played both ways. And like sometimes your quarterback would kick. Nobody does that. Like everybody's a specialist and specialists make more money. We've gone through that before over time. We talked about it with the AI episode. Like becoming an incredible specialist is going to be one of those things that gives you an ability to do that. People inside of our business who are really good at one thing, they're hard to replace. They're recession proof. Those people, because they're great at it. Like I can think in the service department, they're great at turning units. What the hell am I going to look for somebody else? They're great at that job, and that's hard to find. So those are kind of things that you can distinguish yourself if you get good in that way. But that's all about what he's saying no to.
Yeah. And back in Frank's day, he was known as a guy that could go both ways. I'll tell you that.
Ian's audio didn't go out again. I just decided to ignore it.
So the last thing that I'll just leave, Annie Duke, she's written a couple of awesome books. They're Annie Duke was a 2-time World Series of Poker champion. She's accumulated a lot of money. She's a damn good professional poker player. And she's written several books that I think are great business books as well, that just really look at probabilities and trying to make smart decisions. But one of the big things that she talked about, the difference between a pro poker player and an amateur, is that pro poker players avoid chasing bad decisions with more money. And what she's saying is we fold more. Amateurs play more hands because they're excited. Kind of like me as a new stock, right, investor. I wanted to buy all the stocks. Every time I heard one, I bought one, and I tried something new, and I lost a lot of money doing that. Pro poker players sit out a lot of hands, but when they do play, their floor is higher. They play hands where they have a reasonable percentage chance of winning, and the ones where they don't, they sit and they let someone else take the money on that one, right? So that to me is a little bit like Buffett's punch card, what she's talking about there. It's a little bit like Ted Williams not swinging at the bad pitches. And you could see that. You could see an amateur just being excited to be at a table with some other pros, and they keep piling more money into a hand, sunk cost, right? Ego gets in place and they don't know what they're doing, where a pro would just sit there and let you do it and then take your money because you didn't have a good enough hand to play that in the first place.
Jimmy Johnson says, like I always say, it's not about how many great plays you make, it's how few bad ones you make.
Love it.
And I can tell you from a single noise standpoint, I promise Ian there would be no noise and no black screen. So if he doesn't wrap this up soon, this thing's going black.
That's a really good way of wrapping it up, Frankie. I think there has been very little noise in this podcast production by Let Me Speak to a Manager podcast. I think it has been all signal. If this podcast doesn't make you rich, we can't help you. You are helpless. If you are new to this, please follow us. Please give us a nice review. If you are not new, share this with someone who does. And there is Frank blacking out. He is peeing in a bottle as we speak. Fantastic TV as always, fellas. See you, Frankie. If you like what you just heard, and judging by the viewership numbers, you did, hit that follow button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. It lets Frankie and I know that, a few people are listening to this.